The Jeff Davis era in Arkansas politics, he was the governor for the first 3 terms of the century, I guess is a kind of last bellow of the agrarian revolt of the 19th century. By 1898, the wholesale cotton prices in the South had fallen from roughly 85 cents a pound to about 6 cents a pound, so that there was a recession in the countryside in Arkansas and across the South.
While farmers continued to experience economic problems, their discontent was more than simply economic. Farmers were concerned their image had changed. When Thomas Jefferson spoke of farmers, he spoke of them as God's noblest creation. And yet by the last years of the 19th century and the first years of the 20th century, farmers saw themselves increasingly looked at as hillbillies and hayseeds and rubes and hicks. So while many of their problems were economic and real, there was also a problem of image and how they looked at themselves and how others looked at them. Jeff Davis was able to tap into this discontent, this anger, and use his oratorical skills to become the spokesman for this group, although he really wasn't a part of them.
And Jeff Davis was able to tap into that perhaps more than any other politician of that time, and more than any politician probably in Arkansas history. I think he probably was maybe the most gifted politician in Arkansas history, with the possible exception of William Jefferson Clinton, of course.
A brilliant orator, someone who seemed to have his finger always on the pulse of the people he was talking to, someone who could identify with them. And it was these rural elements, these backcountry elements, that made Davis's career.
But the election of 1900, which elected Jeff Davis for a first term, probably really began a few days after his election as Attorney General in 1898. Antitrust was a very popular issue in those days. There was some legislation in the Arkansas legislature to have a pretty rigorous antitrust law. Jeff Davis supported that law, and in a single day he filed lawsuits against 63 out-of-state fire insurance companies, all on a single day, which sent terror through the business community of Arkansas and the nation.
Unlike modern candidates, Davis had very little support from major newspapers in the state. As a matter of fact, many of the state's leading papers were openly antagonistic. The Hell in the World referred to him as a, quote, carrot-headed, red-faced, loud-mouthed, strong-limbed, ox-driving mountaineer lawyer and a friend of the fellow who brews 40-rod bug juice back in the mountains. But Davis could give as good as he got. He responded to an attack by the Arkansas Democrat, one of his other nemesis, by saying this: I have a little boy, God bless him, a little pale-faced, white-haired fellow. If I find that boy is a smart boy, I'll go and make a preacher out of him. And if I find out he's not so smart a boy, I'm going to make a lawyer out of him. And if I find that he has not a bit of sense on earth, I'm going to make an editor out of him and send him to Little Rock to edit the Arkansas Democrat.
Jeff Davis realized better than anybody else the potential of going out and doing the retail politicking in the countryside. And he was the first to realize the benefits of the popular election, because we had switched from conventions to popular primaries.
Political campaigns in Jeff Davis's era were wild affairs. Candidates would often travel together and speak together off a common platform, maybe the back of a wagon, and talk for hours at a time. This was great entertainment in the early 20th century, in the days before TV and radio, and nobody excelled at it more than Jeff Davis.
Throngs would come in just to hear Jeff Davis, and they would cheer him and jeer the other guy. And Jeff Davis would feed into this, into the passion in the crowd. He was a master of the jibe and the flout. Great colorful phrases that just aroused the crowd at every turn.
At many of his stops across the state, he would tell his listeners, if you rednecks or hillbillies ever come to Little Rock, be sure to come and see me. Come to my house. Don't go to the hotel or the wagon yard, but come to my house and make it your home. If I'm not there, tell my wife who you are, that you're my friend and belong to the sunburned sons of toil. Tell her to give you some hog jowl and turnip greens. She may be busy making soap, but that will be all right. You'll be properly cared for, and it'll save you a hotel bill. The word welcome is written on the outside of my door for my friends. And this notion that his wife would be making soap in the governor's mansion somehow managed to resonate with people he was talking to.
And frequently would turn to blows. In 1904, in his last race for governor, his principal opponent was Judge Wood, who was a distinguished justice of the Arkansas Supreme Court.
He made fun of Judge Wood for singing in the choir. When Judge Wood gets up to speak, I want you farmers to call on him for a little song. I can't sing. I ruined my voice calling for gravy when I was little. Judge Wood makes more racket singing in the choir in Little Rock than one of your farmers calling your hogs home.
They got into a scuffle, and Jeff Davis had a gold-headed cane that had been presented to him back when he was Attorney General after he had sued the fire insurance companies. And on this scuffle, he beat Judge Wood on the head with his cane. Jeff Davis absorbed the most virulent strains, the worst strains of populism, and that is paranoia and racism. And he used those two things to his advantage and developed an unstoppable political machine. But he did it mainly to entertain what he called the one gallus crowd, people with one-strap overalls. And it was popular, so he loved to talk about race out in the countryside, and he used some terrible language that everybody would find terribly offensive nowadays.
And part of his campaign stump speech was that he told people that if he were elected, he would fill the penitentiary so full of blacks that their feet would be sticking out the windows. Except he didn't, of course, use the term blacks. It was a political stump ploy that he found worked well. Race baiting worked well in early 20th century Arkansas. And again, there was no downside because black participation was very, very low.
Although it was hard to say that he really meant it, because he occasionally did some good things for African Americans, relatively speaking, for those days. Drinking was always an issue in a Jeff Davis race, because Jeff made no bones about it, he was a heavy drinker. He loved whiskey. And it was always a big issue. The Carey Nation came down and condemned him as the worst governor in America. He was expelled from the Baptist church.
Davis responded to charges of his excessive alcohol use by admitting that he was what he called a pint Baptist, but arguing that his opponent was a quart Baptist.
But in one particular race, they were on the platform with his opponent, and the guy was talking about Jeff's drinking. So Jeff got up and asked his opponent to pick up his briefcase, which was on the floor beside him, and tell us what's in it. And so the guy finally picks up his briefcase and opens it up, and sure enough, there's a bottle of whiskey in there, which Jeff had somebody plant right before the debate. So the crowd just hooted the guy off the stage. So he was always full of tricks. He did those kinds of things almost at every stop.
For all his rhetoric, Davis proved to be a very ineffective governor. He generated a lot more heat than he did light. His accomplishments as governor were minuscule. He later moved on to the U.S. Senate, where he found that the bombastic style that worked so well in the backwoods of Arkansas was not appreciated on the floors of Congress. And he was a very ineffective senator. He served one term, was reelected to a second, but died of a stroke shortly before his first term ended.